Ezra Blackwood stood in front of the garage door, staring at the cold metal like it had betrayed him. His hand trembled as he reached for the keypad, the numbers reflecting in his eyes like a countdown. He had returned from the battlefield expecting rust, dust, and the familiar smell of oil. He expected his grandfather's legacy to still be there, waiting for him. He pressed the button, the door hissed open, and the world went silent. The garage was empty, not one car, not one tool, not even a single tire. The place that had once echoed with the roar of engines now looked like a museum that had never been touched, sterile, clean, and deliberately void of life. The concrete floor reflected the harsh light like a stage set after the final act. Ezra stepped inside, his boots echoing in the emptiness. He moved slowly, as if the air itself might betray him. He searched for the familiar signs, oil stains, fingerprints, the worn mark on the floor where his grandfather used to park the blue Mustang, but there was nothing. Then he saw the notice. Property removed, HOA compliance violation. The signature below was a name he had heard too many times in town, Veronica Grimm, the HOA president. Her smile had always seemed harmless, but now that smile was ink on a paper that had taken everything he loved. Ezra's mind raced. Where are my cars? Who took them? How could this happen without a single warning? And then the real question hit him like a punch to the chest. Who had the power to erase his family's legacy, and why? Ezra stood in the empty garage, staring at the blank concrete floor where his grandfather's cars once rested. The absence felt like a wound, raw and open. His grandfather's voice echoed in his mind, reminding him that the garage was more than a building. It was a place where family history lived. Every scratch, every oil stain, every dent had a story behind it. Those stories were gone now, wiped away with a single stroke of paper. He studied the notice pinned to the door. The document was clean, official, and terrifyingly precise. It stated that his property had been removed for violating HOA rules. It claimed that the removal was necessary for safety and aesthetics. It listed procedures and deadlines and compliance requirements. It was written in the language of authority, the kind of language that made you doubt your own reality. Ezra drove to the HOA office, hoping to find a mistake. The building was polished and organized, designed to make residents feel safe and controlled. Inside, the air was quiet, almost sterile. The staff moved with the calm confidence of people who believed they were above question. Ezra requested the records related to his case, expecting to see an error, a misunderstanding, a clerical mistake. Instead, he found something far worse. The folder contained violation notices, signatures, and dates. Everything appeared legitimate at first glance, but the signature on the documents didn't match his. It was a forgery. The curve of the letters was wrong, the pressure of the pen inconsistent. It was clear someone had copied his name to make the removal appear legal. The realization hit him with force. This was not an error, it was a deliberate act. Ezra returned to the neighborhood, looking for support. He expected outrage, but found fear. Neighbors avoided him. They looked down when he approached. Some claimed they didn't want to get involved. Others acted as if they didn't know anything. The community had been conditioned to fear the HOA, and fear had turned them into silent witnesses. The only person who met him without hesitation was Delilah Thornton, an elderly woman who had lived in Willowbrook for decades. Her home was filled with memories, but she also kept records. She had seen patterns before, and she understood the danger of silence. She showed Ezra a folder of evidence she had collected over the years, photos, recordings, and documents that showed a pattern of property removal and intimidation. Delilah's evidence revealed a disturbing truth. The HOA targeted residents who were away for long periods, especially those deployed in the military. The violations appeared shortly after their departure. Emergency meetings were called, and property was removed with no chance for appeal. The HOA used its authority to steal from the vulnerable. Ezra felt his anger transform into determination. He realized that his grandfather's legacy had been stolen not only from him, but from the community. He could not allow the HOA to continue preying on residents who could not defend themselves. He began collecting evidence. He watched the HOA's financial records, tracing payments and identifying suspicious transfers. He found large sums sent to shell accounts, expenses labeled as community improvements that were actually personal purchases. The HOA was not just enforcing rules, it was stealing money and property. As Ezra dug deeper, the HOA reacted. Threats began arriving, subtle at first, then more direct. The HOA used legal tools to silence him, filing a restraining order and accusing him of harassment. The goal was to isolate him, discredit him, and force him into silence, but Ezra refused to back down. He contacted federal investigators, providing them with the evidence he had gathered. The case expanded quickly. The evidence showed a pattern of fraud, money laundering, and abuse of authority. The investigation revealed that the HOA was not a community organization, but a criminal enterprise. The federal agents moved carefully, building a case that could withstand any defense. They watched the HOA's activities, interviewed residents, and prepared for a raid. Veronica Grimm, sensing the threat, became increasingly desperate. Her confidence began to crack, and her behavior became erratic. When the federal raid finally occurred, it was precise and swift. Agents executed warrants at Veronica's home, the HOA office, and storage units where stolen property was kept. The raid exposed the truth in a way that no argument could. Documents, computers, and evidence were seized. The operation was dismantled. The neighborhood was shaken. The peaceful appearance of Willowbrook Estates had been built on lies. Residents realized that their silence had enabled the crime. The community faced a painful awakening. Their trust had been exploited, and their fear had protected the criminal. The days after the raid were quiet in a way that felt unnatural. The neighborhood looked the same, but the air had changed. Willowbrook Estates no longer felt like a place of calm order. It felt like a place where truth had finally been uncovered, and where everyone was forced to confront the reality they had ignored for years. Ezra watched the neighborhood carefully. He observed how residents began to speak openly, no longer hiding behind fear. He saw the change in their eyes, the shift from silence to awareness. The community was waking up, but the awakening was painful. People were forced to recognize their own complicity. They had allowed the HOA to control them through fear, and that fear had become a form of submission. The federal investigation continued. The agents interviewed residents, reviewed records, and prepared the case for trial. Ezra provided testimony and evidence, not because he wanted attention, but because he understood the importance of justice. The truth needed to be documented. The crime needed to be exposed fully. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records showed the extent of the theft. The forged documents proved the deliberate manipulation of authority. The recordings revealed Veronica's true intentions. It was clear that the HOA had been used as a weapon against residents, especially those who were vulnerable and absent. The community began to rebuild its trust. The HOA was dissolved and replaced with a new leadership structure. Federal oversight ensured transparency and accountability. Financial records were made public, and all decisions required community approval. The new system was designed to prevent future abuse. But rebuilding was not easy. The damage was deep. The loss of the cars was permanent. The theft had taken more than property, it had taken the sense of security the community had believed in. Ezra felt the weight of that loss every day. He knew that the garage could never return to what it once was. Despite the pain, Ezra found a new purpose. He began working with the new HOA board to create policies that protected residents. He helped establish rules that ensured property could not be removed without consent and proof. He supported deployed residents and ensured their rights were protected. He worked to create a system where the community could no longer be controlled through fear. Ezra also began rebuilding the garage, not as a place of loss, but as a place of learning. He turned it into a workshop where young people could learn basic mechanics. He invited neighbors to bring broken items to repair, creating a space of community and shared responsibility. The workshop became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that something could be rebuilt even after it had been broken. Delilah continued to be a source of strength. She attended every community meeting, ensuring that truth remained present. Her evidence had been crucial in exposing the crime, and her courage had inspired others to speak out. She became a symbol of resistance against silence. As the community healed, Ezra began to see the true impact of the crime. The HOA had not only stolen property, it had stolen trust. The residents had been conditioned to accept control, to fear authority, and to remain silent. The crime was not only Veronica's, it was the result of a system that allowed power to go unchecked. Ezra realized that the real battle was not just against Veronica Grimm. It was against the idea that authority could be unquestioned. The community had learned that rules were not always just, and that power could be used to harm. They had learned that silence was not safety, but complicity. The trial approached, and the community prepared. The courthouse filled with residents who had once been afraid to speak. The atmosphere was tense, but there was also a sense of unity. The community was no longer divided by fear. They were united by truth. The day of the trial arrived, and the courtroom was filled with people who had once lived in fear. The atmosphere was heavy, but it carried a different kind of weight now, one of hope. The case against Veronica Grimm was not just about one person. It was about a system of control that had been built on manipulation and silence. The prosecution presented the evidence with clarity. Financial records showed the theft and laundering of money. Forged documents proved the deliberate manipulation of authority. The recordings revealed Veronica's intentions and the pattern of targeting deployed residents. Witnesses testified about the intimidation used to silence the community. The defense attempted to frame the case as administrative error, arguing that the HOA was simply enforcing rules, but the evidence was too strong. The pattern of theft and manipulation was clear. The crimes were intentional, systematic, and cruel. The jury deliberated for hours. The waiting felt endless, as if time itself had slowed. When the verdict was finally announced, the room held its breath. The judge declared Veronica Grimm guilty on multiple federal charges. The sentence was severe and long enough to ensure she would never harm another family again. The moment the verdict was read, Ezra felt a deep, quiet relief. Justice had finally been served, but he also understood that the real healing would take time. The community had been damaged, trust had been broken, the loss of the cars could not be undone. The HOA was dissolved, and a new system was built. Federal oversight ensured transparency. All financial records were made public. All decisions required community approval. The new system was designed to protect residents, especially those who were vulnerable and absent. Ezra played a key role in the rebuilding process. He did not seek power, he sought justice. He worked with the new board to establish policies that would prevent future abuse. He helped create a community that was protected rather than controlled. The garage became a place of remembrance and learning. Ezra installed a plaque to honor his grandfather's legacy and the loss of the cars. The plaque was not a memorial of sadness. It was a reminder of the cost of silence and the importance of justice. The workshop grew, young people came to learn, neighbors brought broken items to repair. The garage became a place of community, a symbol of resilience. Ezra continued to teach the lessons he had learned. He taught that systems can be corrupted, but truth and courage can restore them. He taught that silence is not safety. He taught that justice requires action. As time passed, Willowbrook Estates regained its peace. The neighborhood looked calm again, but this time the calm was earned. The residents had faced the truth and refused to let corruption remain hidden. They had learned that true peace comes from justice, courage, and unity. Ezra stood in his driveway, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. The memory of the cars remained, but it no longer controlled him. He had rebuilt his life, not by forgetting, but by turning pain into purpose. The story of Willowbrook Estates became a lesson. It showed that evil could hide behind rules and that power could be used as a weapon. But it also showed that truth could break through, even when it was buried under paperwork and fear. In the end, the community learned what Ezra had known all along, that true peace is not found in silence, but in justice, courage, and unity.